1977, with the large number of emergency transfers coming into Toronto each day, and the development of a regional trauma center in metropolitan Toronto based at Sunnybrook Hospital, there was a need identified to provide some means of rapid transport of the patient into the referral center, plus a need for ongoing critical care while the patient was being transferred. So in October of 1977, the helicopter ambulance service was started based in Toronto. The type of patient that we transport with Bandage One is by definition critically ill or injured. So there is always a life-threatening situation in the type of transfer we do. In other words, in a lot of cases the patients are very close to death and they have to be actively resuscitated. Now, the resuscitation would have begun at the sending hospital, and it is our duty, our job, to carry on the resuscitation while en route, to keep that patient alive until they can reach a center where it can receive advanced resuscitation efforts. When we first started going out to some of the peripheral hospitals, it was a new service, it was a new idea, and it took some time to be accepted by both the public and by the medical community itself. In other words, who are these people? What are they doing here? How well can they look after the patient I'm sending? What type of ongoing care is that patient going to receive? And I think over the years that we've been here, our acceptance has increased. In other words, more people now know what our job is, what can be expected of us, what that sending physician can feel about allowing us to transfer the patient down. I think statistically, we have been doing a fairly good job.
We're at the machine when the attendants are in the hospital, and therefore we get to talk to a lot of people at the aircraft. And again, you get both sides of it. Somebody will walk up and they'll say, well, see, this thing costs a lot of money, you know, is it really worthwhile? Well, if you can just save one life, it's done its job as far as I'm concerned. It's incredible what doctors and nurses and equipment can do for a patient.
The critical care attendants at the work aboard Bandage One have been trained to a high level of skill to resuscitate people. In other words, we are experts at resuscitating patients. It requires professional people with a professional approach to patient care. The helicopter that was chosen was a Bell 212. It's a twin-engine helicopter, twin-turbine engine. And the helicopter service itself has to fly under the Canadian rules for commercial flight. In other words, it had to be a twin-engine aircraft to fly at night or to fly over any bodies of water. And also, using the larger helicopter, it provides adequate space for patient care, critical care. And the helicopter is leased from an operator, in this case being Toronto Helicopters. The helicopter is leased, and the pilots are leased, and the engineering and facilities, etc., is all leased from Toronto Helicopters. The helicopter itself has been extensively modified for air transport. The helicopter that we use, if it were being used by the military or in civilian applications, the helicopter would have seating for 15 people, including the pilot. Our modifications, we fly with 2 pilots and 2 critical care personnel and 2 stretchers. So we fly with a crew of 4, plus we have room for 2 stretcher patients in our critical care setup. The aircraft has been extensively insulated, both for sound and for warmth. The patient cabin area is completely separate and remote from the cockpit area, so the patient is afforded some means of privacy. And the aircraft has been outfitted with wall outlets for both oxygen and compressed air and suction, much the same as you would find in a wall outlet in a hospital. This allows the use of hospital equipment aboard the aircraft during flight. Also, we have a radio system aboard the aircraft that allows the critical care attendant to have full-time access to a base physician. The base physician for adults is Sunnybrook Hospital. The base physician for children is through a physician at the Hospital for Sick Children. We carry much the same equipment, basic equipment that you would find in Inland Ambulance in Ontario, plus advanced life support equipment, which includes a cardiac monitor defibrillator. It allows us, through a patient cable hooked up to the patient's chest, to monitor both the heart rate, rhythm, and the complexes through this screen here. And also we can provide ourselves with a ECG readout. And hooked into this machine, this modulator, it changes the electrical complexes into a sound that we can transmit over the radio to the base hospital. And they have a demodulator at the hospital. They hook into an ECG machine so they can see the same rhythm that we're seeing if we wish to send them a strip. The defibrillator paddle provides an electric shock that we can apply through the chest wall to stop the heart from fibrillating or the muscles shaking when it's not pumping. When you apply an electric shock to the chest, the patient doesn't jump off the stretcher like they do on TV. It may cause some muscular contraction in the chest wall, or maybe a bit in the arm or something, but it's nothing like you see on TV. We carry a volume ventilator. We carry advanced airway equipment, endotracheal tubes. We carry an extensive drug box that carries mostly resuscitative drugs. We carry IV fluids and solutions, chest tubes, urinary catheters, etc., that you wouldn't find or wouldn't have available in the normal land ambulance situation. We can carry an incubator. Of the total number of calls we do, approximately 30% involve premature babies. And in that case, we carry the neonate transport team out from the Hospital for Sick Children to the sending hospital, where we essentially function to stabilize the infant before transport. This can take anywhere from an hour and has taken as long as 4 hours to stabilize the patient before transport. The emphasis is on stabilization and the beginning of treatment immediately rather than the scoop and run type of transfer. A typical scenario for a call that we might do, and bearing in mind that the majority of our transfers we do here in Toronto are trauma-related. In other words, the patient has suffered a multi-system injury. He or she maybe has been involved in a traffic accident. He or she, the patient, will probably have been taken to the closest hospital where resuscitative and stabilization procedures will have begun. The sending physician in a small hospital may not have all the resources available to him to treat his patient. In other words, his patient has suffered a multi-system injury. Usually, the type of patient we transfer, the type of trauma patient we transfer, requires neurosurgery or neurosurgical intervention as part of the resuscitation or stabilization of that patient. In a lot of the smaller centers, those facilities, that particular area of expertise is just not available. If he makes the decision to transfer the patient, he has to have that patient accepted by the receiving institution. The helicopter would be dispatched and fly out to pick up the patient. When the helicopter arrives, the critical care attendants will do a quick assessment of the patient. will carry out any orders that the base hospital physician has said he wishes to be done to the patient before transport. They will then load the patient aboard the helicopter and fly back to Toronto. The out-of-hospital time for the patient may be only 40 minutes as opposed to 2 hours. Plus, while the patient is in the helicopter, that patient has access to advanced life support capabilities. The critical care attendants can intervene on that patient's behalf while en route. They can carry on the resuscitative efforts. They can carry on the stabilization efforts. They can actively resuscitate that patient while en route.
The controlling of the helicopter is like any other helicopter. This one has 2 engines, 2 throttles, and 2 sets of controls, 1 for each engine. To control the aircraft in flight, the center control here is called the cyclic stick, and what it does is control your direction and your airspeed. And it's if you move it to the left, the aircraft will move left. If you move it right, the aircraft will turn right. Forward, it'll go a little faster, and pull it back and she'll slow down. In the left hand is the collective, and what it does, it's very heavy. The blades weigh about 450 pounds each. When the aircraft is running, it's all hydraulically driven, so it's just like power steering. What the collective does is controls your altitude. If you lift it, I'll just try and tug it up here, the aircraft would climb, and if you lower it, the aircraft would descend, and you're changing the pitch of the main rotor. The pedals would control the pitch of the tail rotor, and as you're hovering, it controls the direction of the nose. If you push a left pedal, then the nose will rotate to the left. Right pedal, it'll rotate to the right. It also counteracts torque from the main rotor, which means if you didn't have the pedals, the aircraft would sit and spin in a circle. So that's basically the 3 controls that all helicopters have. This one, the throttles are on the collective, and with a turbine engine, which this aircraft has, initially it's off at an idle position or full on, and there's governors that as you increase or decrease your pitch, add fuel or take it away from the engine for the power that you're drawing from the aircraft. The center console here has to do with pretty well the engines and the oil systems and temperatures and pressures on board. As you look at the panel, you say, oh my goodness, there's a lot of numbers and a lot of dials. True, there are. Each one has its function, and the co-pilot's job, the fellow that sits on the left, his job is to monitor the gauges, the temperatures and the pressures. He takes care of the navigating the aircraft. Basically, the pilot just flies the aircraft. As far as getting where we're going to go, we have 2 computers on board the aircraft. There's a RNAV and a LORAN-C. And basically, you fly the aircraft with needles centered, and you're going to get to where you want to go. This aircraft is very well equipped. It's fully what's called IFR, or can be flown on instrument flight rules, which means you can enter cloud and fly it basically just with instruments. This is a reason why there's 2 pilots. It's certified for 2 pilots IFR. It's a very stable aircraft, so there isn't a high vibration level. The aircraft is large, and it weighs 11,000 pounds. And when you have something that big being flown around with rotating wings, then it's going to make a lot of noise. So we are very noise conscious. We try and maintain altitudes and airspeeds where we're making as little noise as possible. Yesterday, for example, we brought back a premature baby. Now, one of the things there that we asked the attendants and the nurses was that the baby was on 100% oxygen. So in this example, they don't want us to be flying at 4,000 feet because it can have consequences on the baby. So we stay lower in that type of situation. The weather is a big part of our job. We look at it almost, constantly. Going out to Kitchener, for example. If there is a patient in Kitchener that must be brought back to Toronto, and the weather is not good enough to land at the Uniroyal plant there, then we have to decline the trip. Hospitals as such, or most of our landing spots, do not have approaches where you can fly in on instruments. There's been occasion when we have been out of Toronto and we can file IFR and get back. But again, you can't land on top of sick kids if you can't see the roof. I'm working here, this is my 10th year. Actually, I started at Toronto Helicopters. I started training 11 years ago. At that time, Toronto Helicopters had one little hangar and one little helicopter. So the company has come a long way. Why I wanted to get into helicopters, at the time I was working in an office, and I just couldn't see myself sitting in an office for the rest of my life. I walked out to the airport one day and asked a few questions, and that was it. As soon as I went up in a helicopter, I knew what I wanted to do. A job like this, the experience level is quite high. We must all hold what's called an instrument rating, okay? And in Canada, there aren't a lot of instrument-rated helicopter pilots. It's just a little different flying IFR in a helicopter than it is a fixed wing because of the instability of the aircraft.
Again, the type of patient that we transfer here, not all of the patients survive, but I know that that patient has received the best care possible that we can provide.
As far as being a professional helicopter pilot, and this job in particular, the qualifications to do this job demand that you have the ability and the credentials to fly the aircraft. And secondly, everybody doing the job, whether they have the credentials or not, demonstrate daily that they are professionals. We are in the public eye a lot, well, all the time. And we all know that and try and deliver that type of attitude. We're professionals.
When this program was originally designed, this program in Toronto, was designed as a critical care transport system for patients going from hospital to hospital. As a land ambulance attendant working in the field,